Original Firefighter is the podcast and apparel brand that celebrates the heritage and traditions of the American Fire Service. Join us each week for lively discussions that aim to inspire, educate, and entertain, all in the effort to support mental health and well-being for first responders. Please subscribe, hit that bell, and follow us wherever you listen. Let's get into the show. Welcome to the show, everyone. This is the Original Firefighter Podcast. I am your host, Will Peterson, and we are happy to have in the studio with us the Chief of the Rockford Fire Department, Chief Michele Pankow. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Is this your first podcast?
It is.
It is. Yeah?
So this is exciting.
This is exciting for us, too. So it's exciting for us because you are officially the first fire chief that we've had on the show. And we're happy about that.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. So we've had, we've had some other people from different walks of life, a lot of firefighters, obviously. We've had some nutritionists, personal trainers, and other people that have been on the show, but you are officially the first fire chief. So we're happy to have you here.
Well, thank you.
How is everything going?
You know, it's going great. Incredibly busy, as always. Just trying to keep your head above water. And as you know, we wear a lot of hats.
Oh, yeah.
On the fire department. So just trying to navigate that. And then, of course, just, navigating a teenager. So
oh, boy.
There's no manual for that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How is your son doing? Everything's going well?
He's doing well.
Yeah,
yes.
Good.
Yep.
One of the things that, and we're going to get into a lot of different topics as we go through this episode, but one of the things that I think is very unique is that you have a background of singing the national anthem. And I would like to know, how did you know? One, did you always have a good singing voice? And then how did you land on the national anthem? Because it's extremely hard to sing, as we're told, as I'm told.
It is. It's a difficult song to sing. It's sort of like running a mile.
Yeah.
To answer your question, how did I get interested in that?
Yeah.
I sang in high school and maybe even before that. I do recall being asked to sing something when I was probably early high school years.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, most people who know me would not believe this, but there was a point in time when I was a pretty shy kid. I kind of, didn't really say a whole lot. And when I started to sing,
mm-hmm.
I sort of came out of my shell. And as we know, I've stayed out of my shell, right? So that was
Michele
sort of like...
is not in her shell.
No, I'm not in my shell. So it was sort of a turning point for me. I do remember that. But just kind of started competing in high school with singing. And then the first time I sang the national anthem, I believe, in public, was for the Rockford Speedway.
Okay.
I started doing that young teen years, like maybe 14, 15 years old, somewhere in there. Did it, just a handful of times. And then it just sort of started to snowball a little bit. And then at one point in time, I was singing the national anthem for the Rockford teams. So the minor league baseball teams, several of them as they came through town. What else? The Tough Man contest. I used to sing for that. Just a lot of local events.
Yeah.
Folks would reach out and ask me to sing.
Yeah. No, I've heard you sing the national anthem many times, and it's always great. And I just was interested if that sort of helped to instill sort of a patriotic feeling about who you are, where and again, you had said that you were sort of a shyer individual when you were younger, but certainly the fire service changes that for you.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
As far as the patriotic piece, I've kind of always been patriotic. My mom and my dad were both very patriotic. So, but what I liked about the national anthem is, it truly is my favorite song.
Wow.
So I think the fact that I got to sing my favorite song so often was pretty neat. And like you said, it is a difficult song. And I think that's one of the things that, not only the meaning behind it, but it is a difficult song. And so being able to do that, striving to get that
Sure.
was kind of what I think kept me doing it for so long.
Yeah. So you are obviously, you've said that, the national anthem helped you, get involved with like local things.
Mm-hmm.
It got you involved in the community. And now here you sit, you are the fire chief of the Rockford Fire Department, have been now for a couple of years. And I just want to start back maybe at the beginning. How did you get into the fire service? Where did you start from? What was it that got you even thinking that I think this should be the career for me? Where did that start?
So I had a couple of friends that were on the fire department. And, they talked about it and just what a great job it was. I really completely didn't understand the whole thing. It always interested me because I had my uncles, couple of uncles on both sides of the family, and my grandfather. They were all volunteer firefighters. And so I would hear, bits and pieces and stories, not so much from my grandfather, but from my uncles, just about kind of some of the things that they did on their respective fire departments. But then as I got older, I had a couple of friends that were on the department. I was going to college. I was putting myself through Rock Valley and working a couple of jobs to try and maintain that, and also supporting myself. I was here in Rockford by myself at 18 years old. So as I kind of watched some of my friends pursue that, then, all of a sudden it just kind of seemed to fall into place. I had a couple of folks say, hey, you should really try out for the fire department. And by that time, I'm about 20.
Right.
Still working a couple of jobs, working ridiculous hours, going to school, really just kind of, waffling a little bit.
Yeah. Like all 20-year-olds.
Right. I'm supposed to decide what I want to do with the rest of my life right now, right? So,
which is interesting because it is interesting how the fire service works, is that so many people have come on our show and they say, I wasn't sure like exactly what I wanted to do, but I'd heard about it, the fire service in particular. I'd heard about it from a friend. We've kind of heard a lot of that kind of thing. But it's interesting how when you land the position, the first job, your first seat in the academy, and you're 20 or 21 years old, and you're like in one frame of mind, you're like, I didn't know what I was going to do with the rest of my life, and then all of a sudden, I know what I'm doing with the rest of my life.
I did, right.
And I think that is just a strange, interesting dichotomy of what the fire service represents to, what is it, 1.3 million firefighters across the country. About 30% of them are full-time career, and the other are a variation of paid on call and volunteers. But still, those that get a job or a spot in the academy, when they get it young, like they don't know what they were supposed to do. And then all of a sudden they're doing it.
That's exactly it. I didn't know, I knew it was going to be challenging, but I had no idea the level that I would have to push myself, right? You learn a lot about yourself in the academy.
Yeah.
There are some confidence building courses that are taught, but then there's also it's really hard to quantify, right? It's something that you kind of learn about yourself. How far can I push myself to get the job done?
Yeah.
And a lot of it's a head game, trying to work your way through and figure that out. It's difficult to do. By the time I started the academy, I was 22 years old. It's difficult at 22 years old because, think about, what you were thinking about at 20. Well, I know you had an early start in the fire service, but
sure.
At 22 years old, most people are not thinking like, I've got to push myself mentally to get myself through this. So it really was an eye-opening experience. Once I made it through the academy, first day on a company, I knew this is it.
So many people don't know what their call it their fifth gear is. We'll say
right.
They don't know what that is to say. How far can I go? How far can I push myself? And not because they just maybe never have been challenged to that level. And it takes them a minute to figure out like, I can go to another gear and find that ability to get something done. And the academy is obviously no joke. It's meant to obviously challenge you. It's meant to stimulate the idea that you can do more than you thought you could. I think that that's a huge part of it. And then the next thing is that, let's be honest, it's supposed to make sure that you can actually do the job.
For sure.
Take out the gender, take out the any walk of life. It's just meant to be, can you get through this and can you do the job and fit in and do things that most people are never asked to do in their life.
For sure.
What was it? So what were you challenged with? I mean, because I'm going to go back for a reason. And that is like, it's different today in a lot of ways. But what were you challenged with as you came on and at 22 years old? I came from the same department, obviously. And, Rockford is very much like so many departments across the country that, let's just say it plainly, we're baptized in fire. And there's a level of expectation by certain people, like you should be able to do X, Y, Z. But,
for sure.
But it's not taking into the account of what the individual is actually able to do all by themselves versus how do they function within a team. And I think that back, several decades ago, it was all about, well, if the individual couldn't do the job, then they need to be gone. Whereas in today's fire service, yes, the individual is expected to do a lot, but I think that there's more of a team concept that's built around each individual, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I would say one of the great things looking back at, when I started my journey in the fire service, is to see how far we've evolved.
Yeah.
And when I say evolved, I don't mean that we've lowered standards. I don't mean that, we have changed things and made it easier for people, but just how we've evolved in our support of training people.
Sure.
What we train them to do. There are some, job specific things that we do in the training academy that truly are, your lifeline,
Sure.
Your self-contained breathing apparatus training that has evolved and become something in our academy that's incredible.
It's a juggernaut. The training today is...
It's amazing, right? And so I just look back at some of the things, that we did when I went through training, and it was very difficult. It was, completely different equipment back then, not nearly as advanced as our equipment is today, and still received, top-notch training from the fire department. But to answer your question about some of the challenges, as you can imagine, there were a number of challenges when I started. I started on the Rockford Fire Department in 1992.
Mm-hmm.
So for all you mathematicians, there you go. And so I did have other women in my recruit academy, but I think one of them had come from another fire department. One of them was a bodybuilder. And had, was a known bodybuilder. I don't remember about the other, and then there was me.
Sure.
Right. And I had none of that. I had no fire experience. I'm 5'3" on a good day. Right.
Right. 5'4" in the snow boots.
Right. 5'4" in the snow boots. Yep. And so, I obviously had some challenges right out of the gate.
Yeah.
I will say this. One thing I learned is there's more than one way to skin a cat. So when there's a task that is given to you and you need to perform this, and you said it earlier, yep, we work as a team, but you are expected to do tasks individually.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And that is an expectation. That expectation hasn't changed. And so I worked smarter, not harder, and tried to find different ways. So if there was something that maybe, was a little taller for me or a little more of a reach, how can I do this by myself?
Yep.
So it really did, test me and test my ability to kind of solve a problem.
Sure.
So, that was challenging for sure. I would say that, there were some preconceived notions that folks had because, I'm female.
Yep.
But I would also say that, the large majority of the people I encountered on the Rockford Fire Department, even 32 years ago, were incredibly supportive. Maybe not when I was not around.
Right.
But when I was there and present, they were there and present with me, and they were helping me to do the best the best job that I could do, and they were helping me to learn.
Sure.
Obviously every place has some folks that don't necessarily join that, it's not all kumbaya.
I'm not getting on that wagon group.
Right. So
I call them on the show. I've called, there's a certain group, and it doesn't, I don't ever say, particularly say a name. It's just, there's bleacher creatures.
Yeah.
And they sit
cheap seats.
they sit up in the cheap seats, and they throw tomatoes and whatever. And and then there is some place where I'm going with this, which is, you say you come on in 1992. Again, I mean,
you don't have to keep saying that.
1992. That's a 199er 2.
Whoops.
The biggest thing that I'm driving at is that I have a little bit of knowledge of where, your walk of life, where you began. And I'm sitting across from the fire chief of the Rockford Fire Department. And what I do is I see the arc, this, and it's a very interesting and a very real arc. You don't have a position that I find to be was just handed over to you. You came in at that young age, and I say that for a reason. You came in at a very young age. Probably, if you think about it, there are, and male and female, like I will, for the purposes of our conversation, I'm going to highlight the fact that there are plenty of females out there that are wondering if this job is good for them or should be something that they go for. Mm-hmm. And obviously we say, yeah, go for it. Because at the end of the day, we're going to say the same thing every single time. The best person for the job, the best candidate, the individual that can succeed beyond within the confines of testing, going through the academy, coming out the other side, and then not only contributing individually, but contributing to a team. That's where you're going to be successful. Man or woman, doesn't matter. What I'm driving at is that you came on at a time in 1992 where I still know what the climate was like back then.
Oh yeah.
And it wasn't fantastic.
Nope.
It was, and some people would say, and I would argue to a slight degree that there is some, there's a conversation that can be had for, there were not all bad things from back in that day.
No, not at all.
There is some of that, hey, you need to know who you are to do this kind of job. And we're not looking for, we're not looking for wimps.
We're not looking for the faint of heart.
We're not looking for the faint of heart. I like that. By
any stretch. Yeah. You have to, you got to have a little mettle, you have to.
Yeah.
You just have to. And when we talk about, because quite often I'll get asked about the number of women on the department.
Yeah.
Which, obviously a very real question. And I would say if you look back, over the years that I've been on the department, we really don't move off of that 6 to 7%
sure
makeup. And, there are a number of things I think that contribute to that. One is, I didn't grow up with somebody saying, hey, this is something you can do. Obviously, that's all changed now, right? Little girls grow up now knowing that this could be an option for them. They see it all around them and other historically male-dominated professions, right? But I also think that you have to be willing to make a sacrifice. And so traditionally, at least for me, historically, it wasn't difficult at 22. Where it became difficult is when I started a family, right?
Yeah.
Because then some of those historically traditional roles between, husband and wife, mother and child, they start to kick in. And so then you start to think that, am I going to be able to do both? Because this isn't just a job for me. This is a career. This is a passion. It's a way of life. this is my family, but then this is my family. So how do you juggle that? And I would say nowadays there's a lot more support for that, right?
Sure.
Than, when I started. So that's kind of where I see that piece as far as women go. Really, that's, I think that as you've seen that shift in what those societal expectations are of women, maybe you'll see this start to increase because, as you know, you don't work 8 to 5 and you're not home every night and you're gone every third day.
Yeah.
And you spend 1/3 of your career with a whole group of other people.
1/3 of your life.
Well,
yeah.
I mean,
your career is 1/3 of your life.
Yeah, exactly. So you spend all that time with another group of people that you become close with. They're like family. They're not necessarily just your coworkers, right? And so you're gone. You miss birthdays. You can't just, take off of work and head over to your mom's for Christmas or, you can't. You miss, football games. You miss fill in the blank. There are things you're going to miss, and that's just not for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. So, going back to what I said originally, there are sacrifices that are made. And you just figure out how to navigate them. You try to do the best that you can. I mean, the way I looked at our schedule was, yes, I was gone every third night. But then I was, when my son was young, especially, I was like a stay-at-home mom on the next 2 days until I had to go back to the station, right? Mm-hmm. So it worked out very well for me because, I was able to be part of his life at school and engaged in his,
to your credit, you might be a bit of a gem, whereas is that you can multitask like nobody. And I know that about you. And that's a pretty good gift.
That can be a curse though, Will.
Oh yeah. 100%, because you don't say no to anything for the most part. I might be overreaching a little bit, but I
feel like I said no to this at first. Didn't I?
Maybe, but I begged really, please.
But it's hard, when you look at that, the traditional gender roles and I don't know. I mean, I guess I felt like I wanted to do all of that. If I'm going to do it, I want to do it right.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And so, it is a commitment and not everybody wants that. And not everybody wants to be away.
Did it get kind of branded into you to just prove yourself in every way?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, and well, I don't know if it was branded, but I will say that I felt like I had to. Now, what made me feel that way? Some of that was external for sure. But I also think some of that was just, coming from me like, right. Well, I'm going to show these people.
Yeah.
They're not going to get the best of me, or I'm going to figure this out.
Yep.
Which, some circles call that stubborn, but.
All circles.
All circles. I think I'm losing my hair here.
As you started to, you get past all the academy stuff and you start to get your first assignments and you're moving along in the ranks and file. And again, for our viewers and listeners, you rose to the ranks and you achieved the fire chief role as an internal, acceptance of that position. It didn't come from outside. There were a couple of external candidates in the mix.
I believe, I believe on the initial application process, there were, we had several internal and several external.
Yeah.
I don't recall what the exact number was, but we had both. We had a mix.
Yeah. So I have 2 questions for you. As you started to go through, your time on the job, and you're gaining some experience, you're gaining seniority, you start to think about you're going to take your first lieutenant's test and then continue on through those ranks. When did it flip for you when you go, I'm not proving myself anymore, I can actually lead?
Oh, that's a good question, Will. Look at you with the good question.
Well, they do pay me well here.
I will say, as I see right there, yes. Yeah. That's a really good question because there, you make a really good distinction, right? Because there was a period in time where I felt like I, consistently had to go above and beyond, whether that was, because external, internal, I just felt like that. And then there was a turning point, and I don't know. There was somewhere maybe in the late lieutenant, early captain years where I started to feel, just good in my skin in terms of my work performance. I mean, I always did a lot on the fire department, right? I always was, was in some committee or, accreditation.
Oh boy, we'll get there. Swearing already.
There we go. That old A word there. So once I got, there was a certain point where I just felt very confident in, my ability to do the job. Not that I, couldn't do it before, I did, but I just there was definitely a point at which where I thought, well, okay, I got this, I'm here. And
this episode of the original Firefighter Podcast is sponsored by Castle Contracting. Castle Contracting offers commercial and residential restoration, leading the industry in roofing, residential siding, gutters and downspouts, egress window installation, storm damage assessment and repair, and solar energy, saving you money and time. If you want to be treated like royalty, contact Castle Contracting to schedule a free inspection. Call them at 877-512-4207 or go online and visit castleexteriors.net. That's 877-512-4207 or go online and visit castleexteriors.net. Serving Illinois, Wisconsin, and Kentucky, Castle Contracting has you covered. Your home is your castle. Call Castle Contracting today. Do you think that to a degree, so as I asked the question about when you realize, okay, I'm not here to prove everything, and this goes to anyone in the fire service, is that I think that there is a time period where you absolutely are proving yourself to others.
For sure. That's okay. I feel like that there should be some of that for sure.
It's kind of like, sort of like the cost of entry. But then when you start, and you mentioned that when you get to the lieutenant level and maybe sometime between lieutenant to captain, and you're starting to gain a real sense of your own awareness, I think this is the part where there's two parts to it. I think if you've had some challenges on the street, you can't, I'm very, very, very strong about the idea that you can't just be real good at the in-basket process. In-basket, out-basket process.
Correct, yeah.
And then suck on the street.
Right.
Like you
have to be able to balance both, for sure.
Balance both. So if you've been challenged, but I think that there is a part where and especially you mentioned training, and there's so much of it in the fire service today. I'll get back to that in a minute, but there's so much training and there's so much opportunity in training, is that when you start to go out and you start taking class after class and you start kind of putting it all together and you realize, like, these are average people doing an extraordinary job, and now they're teaching it back to me. And then you think to yourself, like, wait a minute, I can do that. I can do that too. I can, be the leader. I can be the person that gets up in front of others and say, I got something to offer.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know, I remember training officer.
Yeah.
So a position was posted, and I had maybe 5 or 6 years on the department, not a lot of time. And it was for a training officer position. And, you would be part of the recruit academy, kind of coordinate all the instructors there, and then help out with the training for the department. And so I looked at the requirements, and I remember thinking, oh, I have that. Oh, I have that. Oh, I've got that.
And a pulse.
And a pulse. So, why not?
Right.
I never in a million years thought that, I would get the position. But I did.
Yeah.
And so then there was, and I talked to people who transitioned from 24-hour shift work to 40-hour work all the time. And I'm like, there's always buyer's remorse. So those first, few months, you're going to be like, why did I do this?
Sure.
I am working with the rest of the planet. I'm going to the grocery store with the rest of the planet. I'm doing my errands with the rest of the world. Why am I doing this?
Christmas shopping became hard because you're on the 8 to 5 schedule.
Yeah. And so, understanding that, that first time there was a lot of culture shock with me for that. But then as I started to kind of go through that training officer stuff and actually presenting information to individuals on the department and the academy, I'm not going to say that everybody was like, oh, look, she really does know what she's doing. But I do think that I did get a little more street cred, right? Because at that point, I am actually, learning information well enough that I can put it together and share it back out. But I also recognized that, one, I do not, and nor will I ever know everything about the fire service and what there is to do on this job. The other thing is, I learned very quickly that we have a lot of fantastic people on this department that contribute and should be contributing to what we are sharing out with our people. Yep. And so that's what we did. At the time I worked with some folks at Station 1 and kind of reached out to them, or had worked with some folks at Station 1, reached out to them and said, hey, here's what I've been tasked with. I'm sure I didn't say it quite like that at that point in time. It was probably like, all right, you guys, so what do you think? Here's my plan. Here's my idea. But, here's what I'm tasked with. And would you be willing to be part of this? And they were amazing, incredibly supportive. And so, we hit the ground running. And I think, I use that as an example because as time rolls on, at least through my career, opportunities. Don't look the other way.
I was hoping that you were actually going to go right there.
Don't look the other way, because that was something that I thought, well, I'm not going to be, wait a second. I have this, I have that. I'm qualified on paper for the job. And so I jumped at the opportunity, and I think not all of the opportunities in my career, but a number of them, they weren't necessarily, it wasn't something that was sought after, but they did present as an opportunity. And it's like, oh, you know what? I can do that. And if I'm doing that, that means I get to help do X, Y, and Z, or I get to influence this, or I can maybe get this project moving. So it was always kind of a way to move through and contribute to the organization. Yeah. And I will tell you, I didn't in a million years think that I would move all the way through the organization. Right. Ever. Was that, I do know, when you first come on the job, you're like, this is the best job ever. I am never going to promote. Right. I'm going to retire off of the back of this fire truck. And then your body says, somewhere like in about your early 40s, your body goes, yeah, I don't think you are. Maybe not, and you start to feel it, right? It's a hard job. Yeah. You're constantly climbing and you're crawling and it takes its toll. So anyway, I didn't ever plan this.
I'm going to ask you a question, but there's two things that I want to add on. One is that the first thing I remember that as in this conversation, what comes to mind is that when I sat in my academy in 1996, I can remember that the union president at the time had come in and introduced himself, and he had said that one of you will end up being a chief officer. Someone out here in our department is going to be the fire chief. And just sort of like, putting something in front of us that, you couldn't even like comprehend, I'm like, I got to go run 10 laps, but thanks for putting that in my mind, but then it becomes reality, reality later, of course, years and things of that nature. And then all of a sudden, things start to happen and, you get a few promotions or however that comes to be, maybe an appointment to say, the training coordinator. And then that leads to the next thing and the next thing. But then all of a sudden there's an individual out there that is the fire chief. And to the department's credit that we come from is that they have gone from within. I think that there is a great thing about that. I can make a case, and so can you, I'm sure, about, people or departments that hire outside of their agency. I get that too. I can see it from a couple different, places. But those, especially from a department that is of fairly good size. You are the fire chief of the second largest fire department in the state of Illinois. I think that's awesome.
A lot, isn't it?
It is a lot.
Wow,
It's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing about training, and specifically training, one of the things I enjoyed the most about the entire scope of training was that it got you out of your bubble.
For sure, yeah.
Because
excellent point.
Yeah, you could sit there in your little company and do a great job. It's got just no disparagement about anybody that doesn't participate to that level. But if you go outside your zone, you start to realize that, oh my God, there's a really great instructor that knows extrication like nobody's business on the other shift, that I don't get to see hardly ever. And you become, there's a little connection there that starts to happen. And so I've always advocated training is awesome. It brings a lot out of you. You get to absorb a lot from other people and make awesome connections. But one of the things I wanted to ask you was that as you are going through your, moving up the ranks, do you have any big setbacks that you can lend?
I don't know if I would say setbacks. I would say, everybody gets in a slump, right?
Yeah.
Here and there. But you just kind of navigate it and come out on the other side, and whatever triggers the slump, right? It could be maybe you get a little burned out, or maybe you don't necessarily care for your direct supervisor, or you don't have a good working relation with your direct supervisor, right? And so you do get, you'll get in little slumps, but at least for me personally, they didn't last for very long because, once I would identify, okay, you're not acting like yourself, Michele. You're not, really, you're not, this isn't you. This isn't how you are. This is not what you're about. So just suck it up, buttercup, and figure it out, figure out a way to navigate this and move on. Right.
Yeah.
Because, to me, when you do that and you let somebody else change how you are, they have all the power with that. And it's like, I don't even like you enough to let you have that much power over me. Right. So, I'm going to figure this out. But, not really any setbacks. I know I remember there was a promotional exam where, it took me a little longer to make captain. I had to test a couple of times there. But that was fine. I just don't remember being too negatively influenced by that. It just kind of was like, well, all right, next time I'm going to work harder. Well,
I think that even that is enough of a setback to have a conversation about it where, you take those tests and they don't all work out.
For sure.
And you think to yourself like, oh man, I do not want to study this again.
And really
this information is not that
that
interesting.
Is huge when you are preparing for a promotional exam or any type of, advancement in whatever career, right? Like prepping for that in whatever form that takes, that's rough. It really is. 'Cause you're like, I do this work every day. And yes. And I do know that there, X, Y, and Z, that's information I should know and should be able to regurgitate. But at the end of the day, until you're in that position, there are things that you can't prepare for.
Right.
And so I always found that a little bit frustrating because there's so much emphasis on prepping for the interview and prepping for the test and a little less on what the actual job, what that's going to look like.
Right.
Right. But yeah, it can be a setback for sure, because then you say, well, I don't want to go through all that again. But then,
it's grueling.
It is. But then you pull your pants up, you cinch up that belt and you're like, okay, I'm back at it again. And if you want it, if you don't want it, that's something different.
Sure.
Right? But if it's something you want, then you figure out how to get yourself there.
Yeah.
And, two things. First thing is you're not always going to have all the answers, and it's okay to be wrong, which is a lesson I learned. And that's probably that when you asked me earlier about that, when did you feel like you transitioned from always having to prove to, okay, now I'm feeling comfortable in my skin? I would say that that's probably one of the things or one of the lessons that I learned, which is I don't have to have all the answers. I'm not going to be right all the time. So you just need to accept that as part of what you're doing, right?
Sure, absolutely.
And understand I'm not going to have that. And then, also that you're going to grow and you may change. What? You may change.
Yes.
Your viewpoint on something, how you handle a situation.
Well, and you should
may change.
Right. I mean,
you should. Absolutely.
Those, again, listeners, viewers, like you absolutely should change. Don't become a completely different person, like, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of thing. Right.
No, not that kind of change.
But the change, yeah. But
that would be awkward change.
It would be very awkward, right? We'd probably want to use a little help there. But no, what I think that, because, we get, people that'll comment and they'll say, well, I liked it better when it was this way, or how do they know this? And they don't have anything to stand on. It's like, well, hear me out. If you take a test, and it doesn't matter what you're going to become a lieutenant, a captain, move on through the ranks. If you're not adapting to the rank that you are fulfilling, you're missing something, because each step is supposed to be a bigger step than the one that you were just on. Mm-hmm. If you're still trying to be the buddy, if you're trying to be the the academic advisor, for other people, or the party planner, right? It ain't going to work. It's just not. I'm going to say it simply and straightforward. It will not work, because you can't. You have to be able to serve the mission, and the mission's a serious one. I think that is forgotten to some degree. There's a reason that every department has a mission statement. And they didn't just make it up on the fly, and if you're not willing to try to at least try to make a point to meet that mission, you're going to mess up. For sure. I mean, and you know how it goes, right? We're all products of our environment. Sure. So sometimes you lose sight of the larger picture, or you lose sight of the real world, because you're just kind of a product of your environment. And so just hitting the pause button, taking a step back and taking a look at it from a different view can be very, very helpful, with whatever position you're trying to navigate. And you know how it goes when you transition from, a line firefighter to company officer to captain, captain to district chief. Right. You become less and less of a buddy, right? Sure. And you have to... you do have to separate that out a little bit. You don't have to dissociate yourself, but you do have to kind of separate out that, okay, there are things I can't talk about. There are things that are not appropriate for me to say. There are things that are not appropriate for me to engage in at this level, right? And I think it's difficult. I mean, and I, look back and I learned my lesson, there were conversations I had that I shouldn't have had. And looking back, you learn from that, right? Mm-hmm. The way that you handle situations, it's a learning game. And there are times, early on where I didn't handle things as well as I could have. Right. And you learn from that. And, the one thing that I think where we miss the boat a lot, and it's the difficult conversation. Right. So everything is great when everyone's doing well. There are no problems. I mean, managing people. Everybody's got a bowl of ice cream. Yeah, managing people is, walk in the park when it's all like that. Right. I mean, same thing like with promotional exams. Everything's great when people are passing exams and getting promoted. But, you really do kind of see the measure of a person when they're not going that well. And, you've put yourself out there and you don't do as well on a promotional exam, or, you have somebody that you work with that you have to have a difficult conversation with and you don't have it. And then you see it spiral, right? Because if you don't have that conversation, everybody else around you knows you're not having the conversation. Right. And then everybody else starts to chip away. And then before you know it, you've got a mutiny. So, yeah, having the difficult conversation, and it's nothing crazy. It's, Will, so I'm getting ready to
whatever, I'm getting ready to do your evaluation. And, we've talked a couple times this year about, when you're doing X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And I haven't seen a change.
Yeah.
And you told me we were going to see some change, and I haven't seen some change. So it is going to be reflected in your evaluation. I mean, that was
it's not a
30
mystery.
seconds. No, it's not.
Right. And anyone that can't handle that 30-second conversation, I think you've identified the problem in the room.
Right. But it is hard though, too, because you don't want to be, I never wanted to, upset somebody or hurt somebody's feelings.
Right.
But I think, as time went on, I learned very quickly that it's really, it's better to be direct. You don't have to be mean. You don't have to drag it out, but to be direct, because that does save a lot of heartache in the end.
And you can't, those that are in a position of responsibility, you cannot predict everyone's attitude and the way that they're going to respond to what you have to say to them.
Mm-hmm.
The goal should be, hey, let's at least have, if nothing else, let's at least have a working relationship that can work for the both of us. We don't got to hang out on our days off. That's a big part of, and I've voiced this a couple times in different episodes where, I do believe that all firefighters and first responders should find groups of people that have nothing to do with this job. Go do something that's completely different and see what see what it's like, what that's like, right? Come back to this group a lot. I mean, come back to this group often, especially when maybe you're struggling with some aspects of the job, things that are weighing on you. Come back to this group of people because they're amazing people. But if all of your friends and everything you do is just in that circle, and then you try to promote upward, you are going to get faced and hit hard pretty fast with, well, I thought we were friends.
But if you were my friend,
that's just how it is.
That's what, that was kind of always my, hey, if that person's really your friend.
Yeah.
They wouldn't put you in a spot.
Sure.
As a company officer, they wouldn't put you in that spot.
Right.
Or if you're the district chief, whatever rank it is you have, they wouldn't put you in that position.
Yeah. This goes throughout the entire organization of any organization across the country. This is not just, our area specific. It's about the idea of how do I navigate this? Because it's going to be a challenge in so many ways. Mm-hmm. And we both know this, and many people that come on the show understand that it's a difficult process. You got the greatest job in the world, and you also inherited that you are going to have to walk some really fine tightropes sometimes.
For sure.
And if you're gonna kind of stay in common population and just sort of ride the back seat for life, that's fine. I have no problem with that. There are some amazing firefighters that I've worked with that are just the people that I would want on any fire scene, and their attitude is, I'm good on the nozzle, I'm good on the ladder, I'm great, I'm fine. If you're trying to move up to other ranks, just know that that circle gets small. It does get small,
and it doesn't mean that you're not still part of the fire department family. It doesn't mean that you can't still have lifelong, connections and friendships. It just means that you do have to compartmentalize things a little bit more, because you are somebody who has responsibility, and, you are accountable to everybody else that you manage as well.
Right.
Not to mention accountable up the chain. Right.
Right.
And so it's difficult and it's challenging, but I'll go back to what you just said. It is the greatest job in the world at whatever level you're in. If you are, like you said, you're riding the back of a truck, on the nozzle, hooking a hydrant, all the way up to the fire chief. It's a great, I hate to keep calling it a job, because it's not a job. I
think that's just
so
the
much
universal.
More than a job. Yeah,
it is
so much more than a job.
It's so funny because that right there, I recognize that, the idea that this is more than a job, it definitely comes from some of the training that I've gone to, I've had, people that have taught classes that I've attended where they're like, I refuse to call it a job. It's a career. Like they're matter of fact, it is a career. And it's like, okay, I get it. Yes, it is. But universally we speak to each other,
and it's all about the job.
Yeah, it's the job. Hey, I do the job and I love the job. It's a great job. But now it brings me to where you're the top dog. That's the way I call it.
Okay.
You're the fire chief. And now you inherit everything. And there's a bit of magnitude to that, I would have to imagine. But you inherit whatever the department is facing, whatever the department is struggling with, the good and the bad. So, I mean, I know that can kind of start to feel like it's leaning towards, some bad and negative. But the good is, I mean, you inherited, for example, on our department, you inherited 331 people that work for the organization, dispatchers and telecommunicators.
Telecommunicators.
I caught myself. But they are amazing people, all the way through to the youngest person on the job. You inherited everything.
I did.
And to take that even a step further, you inherited, and every fire chief that's out there inherits everyone as an individual, but then also everyone functioning in some sort of way in the team that we set up, the companies that we have. And you have to figure out like what is working and what is not working. And then where's the solution? And what keeps you up at night when you're figuring that out?
There's so many things that rattle around.
Yeah. Top 3 come to mind. Top 2
that rattle around when I find myself not sleeping.
This episode of the original Firefighter Podcast is brought to you by Benny's Slots, Wine, Spirits, and Empire Gaming. With 3 locations serving the Rockford area in Roscoe, McChesney Park at Nest, and Cherry Valley at the Harley-Davidson store, Benny's is the place with taste and enough luck to go around for everyone, provided by Empire Gaming. Each location offers fun and entertainment with weekly sports, events, drawings, and live music in a plush environment. As a side note, I recently had my retirement party this past summer at Benny's at Nest in McChesney Park, and they gave us the VIP experience all around. For the best atmosphere, for the best entertainment, head to Benny's for good drinks, good friends, and good times. Stop in at a Benny's location near you today.
I would say first and foremost, our personnel issues, personnel that are struggling. That absolutely keeps me awake at night, without a doubt.
The individuals themselves.
Yes, the individuals themselves, because, you want to help, you want to do, and you can't, we do as an organization support our personnel, but, just our folks, that keeps me up. Also, ways to expand our services. And I don't mean expand by, having a ton of different ways that we respond, but to expand and to address some of our performance gaps that we know of. As you know, we do a risk assessment every 5 years of the jurisdiction. It really, hasn't changed in terms of what we've identified as gaps. But one thing that has changed is our call volume and the increase in the call volume. And so you have to take a look at, how do we handle that? Are we reactive in throwing resources at this growing number? Well, perhaps partially we should be, right? But then are we proactive? How do we cut some of these calls out of the emergency mix, right?
Sure.
Calls that shouldn't be coming through our 911 center. So really trying to balance that. And that's quite the balancing act. And then as we all know, that all costs money.
Yeah.
That all costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, trying to figure out ways to navigate the funding, that's obviously a very difficult piece because the fire department is one piece of a very large pie for the city of Rockford, right?
Yeah. Or any city.
Or any city, but yes. So trying to understand ways to be creative with our staffing, to be creative with our resource allocation, our response plans. So things like that rattle around pretty much 24/7, different ways. And, and I will, I'll come to work in the morning and talk to the team and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? Or, hey, I was thinking about this. Would this work? How do you guys feel about this?
Right.
Just kind of, because it's constantly, cycling in there. And I've, as you know, got a really good group of people. And so they will tell me immediately if it's not, like you're out of your mind. That's not going to work.
But then do you ever, but I'm the fire chief, so I'm going to make.
I mean, it's funny you say that because I was just thinking, like when you're trying to navigate, like we'll say our performance gap stuff, or you're trying to navigate, a large organization like this.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to surround yourself with people that are going to tell you what they think you're going to want to hear.
Sure. Right.
Now, you do want to surround yourself with people that align with, fundamentally align with you. Right. But you don't want them to be people that are just regurgitating what you're saying.
They're just falling in line. And
you want people that are going to say that to you like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. I'm sorry, that's not going to work. You're out of your mind. But no, like you want that perspective.
Yeah.
You want different perspectives because, and I even catch myself like, yesterday we had a conversation about a particular topic and I felt like, well, no, that's not how we do that. That's not how we do it. And as I walked out of the room, I turned back and I said, am I completely missing the boat here? And the consensus was, yes, you are. And I was like, okay. And I left the room and I thought about it and I was like, all right, thank you. So we had some more discussion today. And I appreciate, the honesty. I appreciate the frankness, of, hey, you're out of touch, or no, that's not a good idea. It's great that we're thinking about it.
Right.
Because I do the same, we throw stuff out. Somebody will say something like, okay, let's talk that out. Let's talk through that. Let's get it to the end, help me get to the end of that. What does it look like when we're done? And a lot of times that gets us like, oh, maybe not.
Right.
That's not going to work. So I think anybody who's in any type of a leadership position, especially like in an organization, it doesn't have to be a huge organization, but at least in our organization, in a leadership position like that, understanding that it's okay to not have all the answers, right? It's okay to rely on people. And I do struggle in that a little bit. I'm not going to lie on that. That I do struggle. I tend to kind of keep, do things myself. I've gotten better, but there's still a lot of room for growth with that one, you know? And it's not that I don't think other people can do it. I don't want to burden them with it.
Yeah.
Right. Because I know they're busy. Because I'm very confident in the work that, our leadership team does, but I just don't necessarily want to burden them with more stuff. So I'll just take care of that. That's fine. But that's what you want. You want people around you. You want people around you that are going to tell you, I
think that, it's going to come out one or two ways. It's either if you have some people around you that can say, that's not a great idea, don't do it. And they're direct with you. That's what that's what you're saying. The other way of going about it is you can ignore that, put the policy out, and the firefighters will figure out how to break the policy anyways. Because if it's a shitty policy, they're going to figure out like, this is why this isn't working. And I think it's interesting what you say, because, you could be a fire chief out there and say, I put this out there as we're going to better the situation, whatever, fill in the blank. We're going to better the situation by doing it this way. The firefighters are going to be like, that is terrible. And we're going to show you how it's terrible. And you could have your kind of like your sort of like your head in the sand and then go, well, they're doing it out there, and have people around go, no, they're not.
No, they're not. Yeah, right.
They're not doing it because it doesn't work. And so I think the firefighters themselves, like they end up sort of, and I think that's what the point is that if you are in a position of strong leadership, the top dog, if you will, and you surround yourself with everyone that's going to agree with you, the firefighters are going to show you how it's not going to work.
Oh, for sure.
If you have some people around you that can say, don't do that. That's your best course of action, I think, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think if you don't have people, being honest with you or providing, let's soften it up a little bit and say providing perspective. If you don't have people around you doing that, you're going to lose perspective really quick.
Yeah.
Very, very, very quickly you will forget. And it is, you have to make a concerted effort the higher you go in the organization to try and keep yourself grounded.
Yeah.
You know that, right?
Sure.
And so when you have people around you that aren't telling you, hey, this isn't working out on the street, or these are things that are happening out on the street. And that's why this isn't going to work. If you don't have people providing you with that perspective, then you're going to lose touch even faster.
Yeah.
Right. So, it is good to have that. And I think that's how that's how you grow. That's how the organization grows. Right. And I think oftentimes, we talk about, let's not do this in a vacuum. We don't want to do this in silos. We've got all these, things that we say to kind of coin that piece of leadership, which is that it's okay to have other people participating in those decisions. It's okay to have other people tell you, no, that's not good.
Yeah.
It's okay to do that. And that's all part of the process. You don't have to yes, ultimately there is a final decision maker, right?
Sure.
I don't want to make it sound like we all hold hands, sing kumbaya, and then let's come to a consensus. Right. There is ultimately a decision maker. Yeah. But, the road to get there sometimes, I think having people that are willing to tell you and give you that perspective are invaluable.
Yeah. So you brought up, I want to just shift a little bit.
What did I bring up?
Well, no, and this is intentionally, I'll be honest and say that intentionally there's something that we discuss on this show and Original Firefighter. The whole premise, as you probably know, is the mental health and wellness of firefighters. And you had brought up that, that's one of the things that keep you up at night as a fire chief, that you think about that there are individuals within your organization that, they are struggling, period. And there's something that I do often on this show where I want to have a conversation with anybody that I can have the conversation with, which is you bring up that the call volume in the fire departments across the country, those calls come in and they go up almost annually every year. The statistic is about 3% annually. And that doesn't, you have done so much work in the accreditation world. You can look back at, different standards of coverage that you've been a part of, and the strategic planning and all this stuff that, kind of brings together our baseball statistics of the fire department.
Mm-hmm. The metrics,
that we did identify and say, okay, well, the metrics say to do these things. And again, it's too much for the show to be like do all these things to make things better.
Oh yeah.
Right.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I think the one thing that I end up really honing in on is, and if this is low hanging fruit, you are free to just, share that. One of the things that I hone in on quickly is in the firefighting world, we typically for decades we would lose somewhere about 100 firefighters annually in the line of duty death category. Now, those numbers have gone down. In fact, as of our episode today, I think that we're around like 56 in 2024. And that's pretty good. We're at the end, towards the end of 2024. It's terrible the lives that we've already lost in 2024. But that number does appear to be lower in comparison to other, years of prior. So the number does seem to be going down in the line of duty death category. But then there's another number that's interesting where it's a bad number, which is that there's a suicidal rate that is starting to outpace the line of duty death. of firefighters. And I'm trying to figure out in conversation, there has got to be some correlation to the annual increase of call volume, just workload, whether that is creating mental stress, physical ailments, a combination of that is starting to drive the first responder to start to have ideas of suicide, ideas of, of harmfulness to themselves in whatever way. And it doesn't have to always be the end result being suicide. It's they dive into, categories of other things, drugs, alcohol. They get themselves into, terrible situations domestically, and they just find themselves in the worst places. Isn't there a correlation that can be drawn between the ever increasing call volume, the workload that's being put upon a firefighter, a first responder, a paramedic, a police officer? It's not that big of a mystery, is it?
I don't know about the, drawing a correlation, right? I'm sure there are studies out there that, show something, right? But what I will say is that as it pertains to the mental health of firefighters, first responders across the board, whether it's our telecommunicators or it's our firefighter paramedics, I think that in this day and age, we are doing, granted, we have a ton of work left to do, but we're doing a much better job of destigmatizing mental health.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I mean, we're just doing,
for sure.
Especially in the fire service. And if you take a look at, is it one triggering incident or one triggering event? Or is it like this cumulative effect that all of these incidents over, years and years and years?
Mm-hmm.
Is it that accumulation? Is it both? What is it? But the fact that we're talking about it, the fact that we're supporting it, I know on the Rockford Fire Department, I mean, it is being, discussed and supported across the country within, the industry, but I can speak specifically on the Rockford Fire Department. We really have grown our peer support program.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, we have also developed some procedures following certain events, as you well know, because your time with us, you were a part of a number of those debriefings and diffusings that we would have for our personnel.
Right.
So that they didn't have to keep it all in, let it build, move on to the next. Unfortunately, we've had some really bad things over the years, right?
Yeah.
And I know you've been a part, you've been a part of a lot of those over the years. So you're familiar. I mean, so you can look back as well. You can see what we didn't do.
Oh, sure.
And what we do now, and just seeing that we do support the mental health of our firefighters much better. But two, I don't want to miss, the part of your question that I think you want the answer to, which is correlating that to the call volume.
Or just
I can't make any call, but I would say like if you have more, as your call volume increases, you're going on more incidents. And so then the likelihood increases that you're going to encounter.
I think what I'm trying to bring out is I'm trying to flush out a little bit of what is the acceptable productivity of the average firefighter and that can go from a couple different perspectives. The average citizen, we understand that, there's a tax base that pays for the firefighters to be in the fire stations, responding, the paramedics coming out to, every type of medical call that you can imagine. So, and this extends to police officers. So basically the entire umbrella is, if you're a first responder, there's a level of expectation that comes from the citizens that pay those taxes.
For sure.
And we understand that. Everybody that does this job understands that just is the way of this life. But what I'm asking the fire service as a whole is, what is the appropriate level of productivity where we can say, hey, we can meet all of these things that our department represents. It can be everything from code inspections, building inspections, plan review, medical emergency, dispatching, put the fires out, accreditation. It can be all the committees. It can be keeping our rigs fully maintenanced and working in proper order. It can also include that the firefighters need to be able to eat, sleep, use a restroom, work out, have some kind of physical condition that keeps them in a good way. And then, and just a couple of things that I want to add to this is that this is coming from 2022, the U.S. Fire Service, the entire fire service. Statistics from 2022, first responder fire response. The public fire departments responded to 1.5 million fires. This accounts for 11%, an 11% increase from 2021. So from 2021 to 2022, the United States saw a rise of 11% in just structure fires. And yet everything that we're told is, well, the fires are going down. The fires are going down. It's like, well, they look like they're kind of going up a little bit actually right now. What always is going up is those medical calls, and about, like we say that, almost every department can see about a 3% increase. And so what ends up happening is that we end up with firefighters that are trying to meet all the demands and meet the idea that I can get on the truck, I can get on the ambulance, answer all these calls, do all of these things. And then they're also struggling with the fact that they're showing in some way, shape, or form that many of them are struggling with the fatigue. And they don't know what to do with it. They can't change their livelihood. They've decided that the fire service is their livelihood. So they're showing up to work and they're exhausted. I mean, I just wondered, how do we deal with that as we move forward?
Well, it's a good question. Really, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a big question.
Yeah.
I think you deal with it in a number of ways. One is what we talked about a little bit ago, which is taking a look at the call volume. I mean, there's not one answer for this, right?
No, not at all.
There's several things that need to happen. We take a look at, what are we sending people on? What are we sending them on a medical emergency? Are we sending them to a residential structure fire? Or are we sending them to a call that would be more appropriately directed to something else?
Right.
What are we sending them to? So that's one piece of it. I think on the back end, because even if you do that, you kind of carve out some of those calls on the front end. So we're at 33,000 calls.
Yeah.
Right. And we're not quite at the end of the month yet. So we're over 33,000 calls. So
and do you remember what you were at in 1992?
Oh, good Lord. I do not. Wow. Yeah. I don't remember what we were at, but we're double digits.
1996, we were just starting to approach about 15,000.
Yeah.
In 96.
We were double digits. I know that, but I remember when we crossed into the 20,000.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, wow, that's a lot of incidents, right?
Yeah.
And look at us now. So, so when you look at that number, and let's just say, we're able to redirect 10% of that through whatever, right? Now we have a couple of initiatives that we're currently working on, getting a nurse in the 911 center to kind of triage those calls and send them to a more appropriate resource. We've also got, you're familiar with our protocol-based call taking.
Right.
And then that will, we're going through that right now in building that out. And so that'll provide the ability for us to triage the calls. Now that doesn't get rid of calls necessarily, right? That triages the calls coming in. That nurse piece will be the important piece. But let's say we get that all up and running and that carves off 10%. So that gets us down to 30,000 calls, right? I mean, really. So,
right.
so we still have to come at the back end too and look at, okay, how can we support, obviously the community in providing the same level of care. We have an outstanding level of care here in the city of Rockford that we provide, advanced life support, which means, whether it's fire truck or an ambulance, you are getting a paramedic.
Yep.
So we, really have a very, like I said, high level of service that we provide. And so then you have to look at, if we want to maintain that high level of service, how do we address that? Which also currently working to do that through, deploying additional resources when available, to try and continue to support additional responses, if you will.
Yeah.
So, we have, that's the call volume itself. Then you have to also take a look at the folks, the people, like how are we supporting them? So are we identifying when there is a call that's a pretty tough call? Typically calls involving children, right? I vividly recall calls that I had with children over the years, and can still in some cases even give you the names, the dates, just because they're very vivid in my mind, because, they're difficult calls to process. So having something like, identifying that, which we are doing, we're better at. I shouldn't say that we're, 100%, but we are much better at identifying that, reaching out to people, making sure that they're talking about it. And then when we have larger events, which unfortunately you are also familiar with those as well, when we have, a large scale event and we have, folks that are subjected to something that they don't see every single day in their fire service career, right? Which, if you can imagine what that looks like, right? Because most people in the fire service see things that the general public don't ever see.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, it doesn't have to be even a large scale event, right?
Right,
I mean,
right.
there are
everything in between.
There are single response emergencies that happen where you have a fire engine, an ambulance, maybe a few officers, and it's just a really bad situation, right? And those things happen. I think that what I am, what I'm hoping for is that there ends up being a honest conversation. It can be at any one of these symposiums or conferences, or, get to one of these, events that happen across the country. And there should be some kind of high level conversation about what does it mean to ask for on both sides. How do you ask for the community, the citizens, to understand that the 911 system is not the basket for everything?
I'm so glad you asked that, because we just had this conversation today.
Yeah. And so there's a start, that's a start. And you talk about, if you can implement particular programs, and again, if you listen and reviewing, what we're discussing, which is every fire department across the country can buy the next software that can help us identify and better categorize calls. Every department can start a committee and, start to try to hone in on best way to deploy our resources. Every department can do that. However, all departments across the country, all firefighters together, are experiencing an ever increasing annual call volume, which to me suggests that if we can, even just minimally change the percentage a little bit, we can say that that's success. But I'm asking the question, but is it enough to bring the reduction of mental stress and health back down to a level that we can understand and appreciate and say, we're making a difference in the individuals' lives, the firefighters themselves, that you don't have to stay up at night and have that rattling around in your brain going, oh my gosh, I hope everyone's okay.
I mean, like I had just said, I think that it's such a large thing
it's
to
huge.
Tackle that it has, you have to come from different directions. We talked about the call volume, we talked about the different support services. We talked about destigmatizing. I mean, also, I think a lot of it is kind of overall wellness too, right? I mean, physical wellness
absolutely
helps support the mental wellness. I mean, so it comes from, all different directions. And you just said something which is probably the final piece of all of it. And that is, one thing that does help specific to the call volume is the public understanding, what is an appropriate use of 911.
I would argue that we have to go back to getting, public service announcements out there to say, I'm going to say it, be really direct. Like there's certain things that you just don't call 911 for.
It's funny that you brought that up, and I don't know if you were, did you have a bug in my office this morning?
No.
I feel like maybe you did.
No.
Yeah. So
it's just top of mind here.
I mean, seriously, we talked about it this morning that, we do need to have some messaging. And I do recall bits and pieces of that over the years, but we need to educate the public on the appropriate use of 911. Because that is one piece of that giant puzzle,
sure,
right? That helps us support our first responders.
Yeah.
So,
no, like I said, I think that they're, and perhaps, I know your background, well, that you are a great leader. You have something to say.
Thank you.
And it's true. I mean, you've done a great job, filling the seat that, is tough to get to. And again, to go back to that, to start where we started from, which was you're 1992, you're 22 years old, and you're figuring out like, hey, is this job for me? And then it is your job. And then, you trick on through a bunch of years, and now you're the top dog. And there've got to be days where it feels good to be at the top. And then there are days where it feels like you're the hydrant. And,
absolutely.
Like you're the one getting
of course.
Yeah. And that just has to be recognized, for any fire chief that's out there that either listens to this or goes to any other higher level symposium or some kind of a convention where there's a course to listen in on, or you should probably drive this course to say, what are we doing that is going to give longevity to the current first responder, the firefighter that we're hiring today. If we look at it, in every single year, there's going to be an increase of calls, and we're not going to do enough to keep up with the demand in terms of personnel, resources deployed, or should we be asking the public, you can't call 911 for everything. Is that a fair conversation?
With the public to message out?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I know I keep saying for sure, but it is absolutely not a conversation. It's absolutely messaging.
Yeah.
That needs to be out there, which is what we talked about this morning.
Right.
Literally talked about it this morning because we have calls that there is nothing medically wrong with the individual.
Yeah.
It's just that they can't be there, or they want to go to the hospital, or, there are times when they see it as a ride to get to where they need to be, and will, manipulate the system to support that effort. So,
well, I think it
does need to be.
I think it's a fair
out.
conversation. I think we're ready for it as a society. I think we're ready for it. The reason I say that is because let's face it, when did 911 become, instituted? I don't, exactly know the year. I know that when I was in high school, I believe that they were still using a 10-digit number in high school. I think so. I don't know for sure.
I think, in this area, I feel like I was in high school, junior high school, when they implemented 911, and then it became eventually E911, which is what provided the phone number back. Yeah. Right? They could tell where you were calling from.
But when that came out, what did we all, well, when I say we, basically it became a part of education, which was, this is when you call 911. This is why you call 911. And now that we've done this for a number of decades, and to just sort of, drive the point home, which is, unfortunately, we're seeing a bit of a detriment to the first responder. That is, there are some out there that are making some bad decisions. They're deciding that I've done too much. I can't go on anymore. I've seen too much. I'm exhausted. I'm mentally fatigued, whatever that is. And they don't know what to go. And I appreciate on the show that you've really driven home that, we do have better programs in place, that we have peer support. We have other ways that we can support firefighters or first responders that do need that mental help. To go one step beyond that, I'm maybe suggesting, and it's not like I'm not splitting atoms here. I'm just basically saying, I think that we're ready as a society to have another conversation about the appropriate ways to use 911 so that we are not inundating every parts of our service for the things that don't rise. I'm sorry, there are low acuity calls, and you know that.
Agreed. Yeah.
You can't turn on a television at night and not see the fire department front and center on something. It's active shooter. It's wildlands burning. It's hurricanes on the, and the fire department is front and center in all of that. And so I challenge that a little bit on the show to say, I hope that someone out there is taking a harder look at that. And I hope that leaders like you are taking a look at that as well.
We absolutely are, because really you have to get to the source, right?
Yeah.
You have to get to the source. And when we look at, we look at our call volume, and then we look at our call volume.
Right.
We break it down and get it so granular. And that's not just us, right? That's not something that the Rockford Fire Department invented, right? It's across the country. It's the national reporting system. That's how calls are coded. So that's what we do. And we, really are trying to target those calls that should not be. What are we doing now?
We're
you're putting up our metrics.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to point out to you, because you did say that, and I was seeing now so that's October. So November will be coming out here pretty quick. We still have, as you can see, a decrease in fires. Everything else is up. Yep. EMS calls, the other, and then obviously total calls are up. But fires are down right now.
Because I retired.
Right. Yes. You left. And now the fires are down. Yeah. So here's
investigation pending.
I would like to point out, though, I'm glad you brought that up. So, you talk about evolving, right? Yeah. So we, with the help of our statistical analyst and then the communications manager for the city as well, we look, like I told you, we look at a granular level, what we're doing, what we're responding to, so that we can pivot if we have to, which is what we are in the process of trying to do, because we have identified just exactly what you were talking about, calls that don't need to go through the 911 system. Yeah. Right?
Right.
But we also look, through kind of a different lens on a very, kind of a high level. This is a high level graphic that you have up here. We look at that monthly. So that we know, what are the trends that we're seeing. And we do have some other things that we also look at. We have the 911 center. We take a look at, calls per hour for the 911 center, calls coming in, emergency calls coming in, non-emergency calls coming in through the center. And then we also take a look at our units, meaning each of the fire trucks, the ambulances, and what their, cumulative calls are for, year to date. Yeah. And we try to keep an eye on those so we understand, most of the time we've got a pretty good handle on it. It's not rocket science, right? We know where, and we know which vehicles are running their wheels off. They're all running their wheels off. We know which ones are doing it even more. That's pretty consistent. But it's hard to not run all the wheels off if resources are not added. And again, I'm taking a position to illustrate that we see this when we get comments on the show where people that are coming in, with comments from California and Texas. And it is the same across the board. Trust me, it really is. Like they'll come in with comments that say, this is happening everywhere. This is happening in my department. We haven't added, this, that, and the other. And it can, I get that that's just kind of like the tightrope that you have to walk. For sure.
Between the citizen, the tax base, between the other city departments and their head of organizations, the mayor, things of that nature. There's a lot to navigate there, which kind of goes with the fire chief position or any of those, top positions in any organization. And I think that's what starts to become the struggle for a lot of them, where it's like my number at the slowest engine is starting to look like the engine that was the busiest 2 years ago, 3 years ago, however identify that. So it'll be interesting how this, I think, plays out. Probably everything takes a while, 5-10 years it's a long time. There's no quick answer. I know that.
And another thing too, when you're talking about, the service to the community,
mm-hmm.
right? So it's not that first call that goes out the door, right? It's the second call that comes in that's right near that fire station or that area. So, and then what happens is it gets everybody they're all out of sync. They're all out of place, right?
Yeah.
And then it just has a domino effect, as you're aware.
Right.
And, we have, innovations and things that we've implemented over the years to help that efficiency a little bit more. But at the end of the day, you can only send so many vehicles. You only have so many to send, I guess, is the point I'm making.
Yep.
We have automated vehicle location, AVL for short,
mm-hmm.
and that pulls the closest vehicle. So, if the vehicle next to your house goes out on a run and another call comes in next door to you, we use that AVL to pull the first or the closest vehicle. And that's coming from, sometimes it's coming from several miles away.
Oh, sure.
So it's, we look at so much. I mean, I could, this, and I don't want to put anybody to sleep because I could talk about, our risk study that we do for our jurisdiction. I could talk about that for a really long time. You'll all be sleeping. I'll still be talking. I really enjoy taking a look at, when I say enjoy, I do like doing that. I like understanding, how behind and why. So
analytics.
Yeah. Why do we have such a gap here? What is causing that? Is it because there's not a fire station there? Oh, no, it's not. What it is because, this particular area is what we consider a hot spot.
Right.
And so maybe it's not the location. Yeah. It's not, it's just, all right, are we now, let's adjust our response plan.
We have a concentrated area that's developing a lot of calls for us. Yeah.
So, and what's the cause of that?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we having an increase in calls, in this particular area all of a sudden?
Right.
Why are we seeing this trend? So just, really trying to take a look at those calls very regularly.
Right.
To understand, we do our big study every 5 years, but we look at that stuff, monthly to see where our trends are.
Sure.
I mean, like I said, at a very granular level. And then we compare that to all the constants, across the department. And we're constantly looking to see how we can, do better by the citizens, do better by our people, serving the citizens, how to do better across the board.
Right. This has been awesome. One of the things that we like to do here at Original Firefighters, we like to take the conversation down to a place where we can have a little bit of fun and not be as serious as we've been.
Ooh, that was really serious.
I do want to make sure that I do this because I made a commitment that when we have these conversations, there's a group of people that should be elevated that we can have a real appreciation for, and that is for the group of telecommunicators.
Absolutely.
They are, when we put up those statistics, they are the ones that are getting the first call, and they're getting all of them.
They are.
It doesn't matter if you
do what they do.
They have a ton.
Oh my gosh, so, they're incredible.
Yeah, they are awesome. So I just want to always make sure that we let them know that they're included in the entire conversation.
Yes, give them a shout out.
Yeah, I love it. What we're going to do is switch a little bit to something that I know that you're passionate about.
I'm a little concerned right now. I'm not going to lie.
No, you probably shouldn't be. If we know anything about our fire chief is that you like your wine.
Oh, I do.
You do.
I do.
The first question I want before you do this is so beyond the department, beyond the job, when you have a minute to say that you're off duty, I don't even, is that a thing? Can you be off duty as a fire chief?
I mean, occasionally.
Yeah.
But for the most part, no.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you are off, what are you passionate about? Is there anything that you enjoy doing in your off time?
Yeah. I mean, well, I mentioned a little bit earlier, I have a teenager at home, so he keeps me pretty busy. But he's an older teenager, so he'll be riding off into the sunset at some point here. But I am a project person.
Yeah.
I love to do projects. And when I say projects, I'm not talking about work projects, like projects around my house. Total do-it-yourselfer. So I'll just preface all of that by saying that I moved into my current home about 2.5 years ago. And prior to moving in, I did a ton of renovations, throughout the home. One of the renovations, and when I say I did a ton, like a lot of the work I did myself. I had some friends, some very, very good friends that came and helped me demo. And so at the time, I demoed my master bathroom. Very dated. Some of those friends will argue and say, but it worked fine and everything was good. You could have left it. Either way, whichever camp you're in, it's gutted. And it's still gutted.
Yeah.
So my project, I don't have a lot to
We've all done
time
that.
to work on that.
We've all looked at a house, looked at a room and said, that's got to go. And you have no plan. Well, maybe you do, but you just don't get to it.
Yeah, I just haven't gotten to it. I will get to it because that's sort of my, that's my baby. I want to have this nice, master bath. So I'm currently sharing the bathroom with my teenage son. We call it the wallpaper bathroom because I don't want to renovate that bathroom till the other one's done.
Gotcha.
So we've got lots of wallpaper that we navigate, but I'm a project person. To answer, your question, I like projects, whether it's outside, on the outside of my house or somewhere around my yard or inside. Yeah. I will say though that, since I took the fire chief job, I haven't had, as much of it. I have to have very short projects, things that'll, take me a day, something I can knock out, in an afternoon on a weekend. And most of that's been sort of fixing things, but I do like to do that stuff myself, whether it's something I know how to do, or I don't know how to do and maybe can, pick somebody's brain on how to do it. And then there are certain things I won't tackle, but
electrical.
Well, I'll do some electrical.
Really?
I won't run electric.
Okay, well, there's a difference.
Yeah, I won't run. I've done that.
Yeah.
I've done that
that's
once.
That's the one thing I stay away from.
Yeah.
No.
But, light fixture, like I just put up new exterior light fixtures about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Been wanting to do it since I moved in. And I was like, okay, that's one of those smaller projects. I can knock that out.
Sure.
I did encounter a couple of issues, but so it took me a little bit longer than an afternoon. Like I had to come back to it a couple times over a weekend.
Yeah.
But I got it done.
Well, I know that one of the things that you do enjoy is you like some wine.
I do.
You're a wine person. I'm a bourbon person, but I can enjoy some wine as well. And I got a couple of things that, so here's what I'm going to do. We're going to do a little wine talk.
Oh, no.
A little wine talk.
Oh, no. Heavens.
Yeah. So a few questions that are going to go, and just whatever comes to mind, throw it out back to me is, so here's the deal. What is your favorite wine or top 2 or 3? What's your favorite that you go to? Do you have
So I have a couple.
Do you have a brand or a category as well?
Well, both.
Okay.
So I would say a number of years ago, and I'll get to my point. Number of years ago, a friend of mine and I went into, I feel like it was Geneva, Illinois, Batavia, somewhere in there.
Okay.
There was a wine club. I'm sorry, a wine class in there. And so we would drive in a couple times a month. And in this wine class, this gentleman who would do it at night in the basement of his wine store said, okay, here's a couple of things. He's like, you've got to find a wine that you like. And we call that the weekday wine. That's a wine that, you could drink it every night of the week. And it's not incredibly expensive. The fun part is finding one that you like, for as cheap as you can find. That's part of the game, right? He said, and then there's this weekend wine. And the weekend wine is a celebratory wine, or it's one you enjoy, for special occasions. Okay. And that one, the dollar amount, whatever, that doesn't matter. You need to like it. And I always kind of lived by that. I was like, okay, that makes sense. So I have a couple of, weekday wines that I really enjoy. One's just like a cheap red blend, but don't laugh. It's called Inferno, and it has flames on the bottle.
Oh, of course of course it is. Inferno.
Yeah.
If you're out there, Inferno, we're plugging you on the original Firefighter.
Big plug. What I like about it is it's got like it's aged in whiskey barrels.
Yeah.
So that's what I think the draw is.
I think all of that's, interesting.
And now that's kind of a big thing. There was a time where I think Robert Mondavi was another one that, I will also drink. But that was what really started with that whiskey or bourbon, bourbon bear or bourbon soaked. And then there is, my special occasion wine. And that is Camus, and that's a cab, and I absolutely love Camus.
Camus is good.
It amazing. Yes, I don't have it very often, but when I do have it,
it's $69 a bottle.
It's definitely not a weekday wine.
Yeah, you can get it at Costco right now. Well, you've been able to for a while.
Yeah,
but
you can get it. You can get it a couple places around town for sure. But that's one of my faves.
Yeah, no, Camus is awesome. Okay, so here's a couple more questions. So how should wine be stored?
Oh, so I can tell you how I store mine. It doesn't get stored for very long.
Is it in a box in a refrigerator?
No, it's not in a box in a refrigerator. No, it's supposed to be temperature controlled for white wine versus red wine. And there are other people out there that have,
predominantly it's dry, right? Some humidity control.
Mm-hmm. And then white is typically a little bit cooler. Yeah. But not, there's always exceptions to that wine rule, right? I don't drink a lot of white though.
Yeah. Well, in the summertime, I like some, like a rosé.
Yeah.
I do.
Good for you. That's great. That's great. I will drink a little bit of white wine, but I'm definitely a red wine drinker, and I'm really heavy on the cabs. I enjoy cab.
You're supposed to put the bottles in a way so that they tilt towards the cork, right? So the cork doesn't dry out.
So the cork doesn't dry out.
Yeah. Okay.
So my bottles are stored tilted.
Yeah.
For
gotcha.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So then here's another question. So should you always decant wine? Like if you can. We have a bottle of wine sitting here, and obviously it's not been decanted.
Right, if you can.
And by the way, this is special because we usually have a bottle of bourbon.
That's a bottle of cab right there.
Yeah.
I'm liking it.
So it's usually bourbon on the show, but we thought, hey, when in Rome.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
When the king's here.
Oh, stop.
So but when you can, should you decant wine?
Yeah,
what does it do? It opens it up.
It does. So it just kind of like that air, kind of aerates it a little bit. And you can, you pour it in the decanter, and there's all sorts of little devices you can put in the bottle that'll, kind of perform the same thing. But if you have an opportunity and the time to do it, yes, I would say, decanting it. It's similar to like bourbon, right? Like sometimes you put a little bit, put a splash in there, right? Just to kind of open it up, open the bouquet up a little bit. Is that going to taste like bourbon?
I don't know.
It might.
I don't know. I think it's just going to taste like it's been aged in a bourbon barrel.
Bourbon soaked barrels. Yeah, but you should decant it.
Ooh, that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's actually really good. Okay, so you should. All right, so then, so the term legs.
Oh.
What is legs referring to when it comes to wine? Isn't that the as it comes down the
side of the glass?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Supposed to indicate?
I don't know what that indicates. I did go to a class years ago that talked about that, but I don't recall. Because there's also something when you take the glass.
Yeah, when you
do this,
move it around and how it coats.
Yeah, and it's like the viscosity, but I don't know.
But that's a good sign, is it not?
It is, but I don't remember what it what it means. I mean, I've always been entirely too impatient when it comes to drinking wine to do all of that. I also remember going to a class where it was called trilling. And so you would take a bit of wine and then you kind of like, you basically suck all the alcohol out of it by going with this wine in your mouth, which is really weird because it actually works. And then that alcohol tingles like.
Yeah.
And then that's supposed to help you like just taste the flavor of the grape.
Yeah.
Whatever. I mean.
Just pour it in my glass.
It just seems like a lot of work.
And put it to my lips.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of work.
Right.
I do like trying to identify what's in the wine though. I do like that.
So this is actually not on my sheet of paper here.
Oh boy, you're winging it.
I am. Can you differentiate between like if you didn't see the label, can you differentiate like this is a Cab, this is a Merlot, on down? Can you do any of that?
Yeah, I can do some of that for sure. Especially like a Merlot is typically like got a very very mild flavor and a very very mild finish. I can sometimes. I mean, I'm pretty good at identifying if something's been aged in a bourbon soaked barrel or where I get a little like there's also a little bit of a distinction like something that's in an oak barrel, but I'm not as great at doing that. Sometimes I can tell, sometimes I can't.
Yeah, gotcha.
Just like the variety of the barrels that they're soaked in. But going from the different types of wine, I can usually do, there's Cab, Merlot, a Pinot, that's a little bit lighter. Occasionally there's a little more fruit in that. And I don't mean like sweet necessarily by any stretch, but there is a little bit of a fruitier, you might taste a little more of the fruit. It's lighter.
Sure.
To me.
So my next question is, what are the 5 S's? No. What are the 5 S's in wine connoisseurship?
Is that a word? I don't know. Do you like that connoisseur?
Sure. What are the 5 S's?
I don't know. Do you know them? Do you have them written down on your paper?
I have them here, yes. I just wanted to know.
I don't know.
Come on.
Sip.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Hey, that's one. That's one.
A good guess.
You got one. You got one. What's another one? All right. So you're 20%. You're supposed to see it.
Swish it.
Yeah. So
swirl. I mean, swirl it. It's not swish. It's swirl. I've heard them. I just don't remember.
Then you're supposed to sniff it, and then sip.
I'm not.
And savor.
Patient. Oh, I will savor. Yes.
So see, swirl, sniff, sip, savor are the 5 S's in wine connoisseurship.
Whatever we said as a wine connoisseur. I don't think that's a word.
Despite what you may have heard, wine legs or tears are not an indication of quality of wine. No kidding.
About the alcohol
Man, we
level.
love our booth.
The alcohol level in the wine. See? Oh yeah, density. So there we go.
We have Aaron in the booth, and he's awesome.
On the sides of the glass, then low alcohol wines. That makes sense. Because we were talking about the thickness, right? The density.
Oh, for sure. So we do our best here at Original Firefighter. Yeah, thank you, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron.
We do our best at Original Firefighter to have purpose to almost everything we do. Although, hey, we like to have fun and, just go with it. But I did choose this wine for a reason. This comes from Napa Cellars, obviously from Napa Valley. So did you know the largest historical winery fire in the world was the Glass Fire in Napa Valley, California in 2020, affecting 1,500 structures and 27,000 acres across Napa and Sonoma.
I didn't know that it was the largest, winery vineyard fire, but I do remember the fire because it made me sad. I do remember that because I thought, oh boy.
I want to know who's naming these the glass fire as in you get a wine glass from Original Firefighter.
Yeah, I don't know why it's
but yeah, that's
fire, but I do remember that fire.
That's the largest winery fire.
Remember seeing it. But no, I didn't know that.
You've been out there, right?
I've never
You've
been.
not?
Nope, that's going to be a retirement trip. I'm very excited. Yes, I would like to. I would like to kind of travel.
Yeah.
Down the.
Well, I highly recommend.
Yeah, I have friends that have been out there and have done the tours, the Napa Valley tour, and have enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we have enjoyed having you on the show, and we really appreciate that you were here with your perspective. Wish you all the best as the fire chief for the Rockford Fire Department. We hope you do great things, and the organization is awesome, as you have already said. Great people, and we appreciate them every day. Here at the Original Firefighter, remember that the Original Firefighter Podcast is here for your off days. Remember that we have merchandise on our website at originalfirefighter.com. And also remember that one of our biggest causes is that you be safe, you be well. If you need help, please reach out. Thank you. Be safe.